Laura McCarthy closed her back door, stepped over the sleeping dog that was dribbling peacefully onto the gravel, and walked briskly across the garden to the back gate. Balancing the laden tray on one arm, she opened it, slid nimbly through the gap, and went into the woods and down to the stream, which, it being late summer, had dried up again. It took 2 steps to cross the planks with which Matt had breached the ditch the previous year. Before long it would rain, and they would be slippery and treacherous again. Several times, the previous year, she had skidded while crossing, and once the tray's entire contents had ended up in the water, a feast for some unseen creature. Then she was up the other side, the soil damp and sticking to the soles of her shoes, making her way toward the clearing. Out of the shade, the evening sun was still warm, bathing the valley in balmy, pollen-laden light. In the distance, she could see a thrush and hear the peculiar, abrasive chatter of starlings as they rose in a cloud and settled again on a distant copse. She straightened the lid of one of the dishes, inadvertently releasing a rich, tomatoey scent that made her quicken her pace toward the house. It had not always been so decrepit, so unapologetically grim. Matt's father had told him tales of shooting parties gathered on the lawns, of summer evenings when music floated from white marquees and elegantly dressed couples perched on the limestone walls and drank punch, their laughter muffled by the forest. Matt remembered a time when the stables had been filled with glossy horses, some kept purely for the benefit of weekend guests, and a boathouse on the edge of the lake for those who liked to row. Once, he had told her these stories often. It had been his way of equating it with her family home, of suggesting their future together would match what she had left behind. Perhaps it was a way to imagine what might lie ahead. She loved those stories. She knew exactly how the house would look if she had her way. There wasn't a window she hadn't mentally dressed, an inch of floor she hadn't recovered. She knew how the lake looked from every east-facing room. She stopped at the side door and, out of habit, reached into her pocket for a key. Once it had been locked daily, but there was little point now. Everyone around here knew there was nothing to steal. The house sagged, its paint peeled as if it could no longer be bothered even to reflect on its grand past. Downstairs, several missing panes had been covered with odd bits of wood. The gravel was sparse and overwhelmed by nettles, which brushed malevolently at her shins. "Mr. Pottisworth? It's me, Laura." She waited until she heard a grunt upstairs. It was wise to alert the old man to one's arrival. The lintel was still peppered with shot from the occasions when she had forgotten. Luckily, her husband had remarked, the old bugger had always had a poor eye. "I've brought you your dinner." She listened for the answering grunt, then went upstairs, the wood creaking under her feet. She was fit and barely needed to draw breath after several steep flights of stairs. But all the same, she stood for a moment before she opened the door to the master bedroom. What might have been a sigh or a flicker of resignation passed through her before she placed her hand on the doorknob. The window was partially open, but the smell of elderly, unwashed mail hit her squarely and sourly, with its attendant, underlying odours of dust-filled soft furnishings, camphor, and stale beeswax. An old gun was propped beside the bed, and the colour television they had bought him 2 years ago stood on a small table. Age and neglect could not disguise the room's elegant dimensions, the way the frames of the bay window neatly bisected the sky. But the visitor's attention was never allowed to linger long on its aesthetic qualities. "You're late," said the figure in the old carved mahogany bed. "Only a few minutes," she said, deliberately bright. She placed the tray on the table beside him and straightened. "I couldn't get away. I had my mother on the phone." "What did she want? Didn't you tell her I was over here, starving?"